The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we now learn there are about 40 Liberal MPs that believe that this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost, crime, and corruption. But there's this strange rule in the Liberal caucus that you need to have permission from the Prime Minister to speak at the microphone. So a Liberal MP wanted to get up and say quadrupling the carbon tax is a bad idea, or doubling housing costs is making people homeless. They can't do it. Will the Prime Minister lift the gag so his Liberal MPs can say to his face that he's not worth the crime, the cost, and the corruption?
Once again in English, none of these questions have to deal with the administration of government, but I see the order. I see that the Prime Minister is rising to his feet. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it seems that the Conservative leader is confusing rules that apply within his Conservative caucus to rules that we have in the Liberal Party. But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, we see at which point the Conservative leader is simply focused on playing politics and gaining power. That's why he wants to talk about things that are not having to do with delivering for Canadians. He doesn't want to talk about the fact that close to 1 million Canadians will be receiving dental care because of our Canadian dental program that he says doesn't even exist and that he's voted against every step of the way.
Now, I ask the honourable member from Battle River Crowfoot to please not take the microphone when the speaker is up on his feet or when other speakers who have been recognized by the speaker is taking the floor. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry to have to bring up this terrible rule. It's just that Liberal backbench MPs are coming and talking to all of us to say that they're not allowed to speak to him. And they're wondering if I could perhaps pose some questions on their behalf. Mr. Speaker, I guess they can't get anywhere with the current Prime Minister, so they'd rather talk to the future common sense Conservative. Instead of silencing his own MPs, will he let them get up to the mic tomorrow to tell him that he's not worth the cost, crime, and corruption?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the reality is he can't administer the government because he's too busy fighting for his job after 9 years. Even if his MPs know it. He broke immigration, he doubled the debt, doubled housing costs, doubled crime, doubled the cost of living in a home. He wants to quadruple the carbon tax that's already forced 2 million people to a food bank, 1 in 4 kids to hunger, 25% of Canadians to poverty. Canadian food prices up 36% faster than in the States. StatsCan says we have the biggest gap between rich and poor in our recorded history. His MPs know that he's broke the country. Will they call a carbon tax election so we can fix it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition, like all of us in this House, know that Canadians are facing challenging times. His solution, however, is to offer them cuts, is to offer them no programs that they can rely on, and to vote against things like dental care and pharmacare and investments in a green economy that is going to create jobs and careers long into the future. He wants to harm Canadians where we're focusing on delivering for them. He wants cuts to programs and services while we're busy investing in Canadians and their futures. That's the choice Canadians get to make.
The Honourable Member for Bellevue-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, time is moving on.
Calgary Forest Lawn.
After 9 years of the Liberal NDP government, taxes up, costs up, crimes up, time's up. The parliamentary budgeting officer confirmed what Canadians already know. This incompetent finance minister can't do math. She's going to blow through her own deficit this year by $7 billion. That's higher taxes and lower standards of living. 1 in 4 Canadians are already skipping meals, and this Liberal-made misery is only going to get worse. Why not call a carbon tax election now so Conservatives can fix the budget?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am so glad to hear the Conservatives talk about the PBO, because just a few weeks ago, the PBO did a report on the sustainability of the federal finances. And I'm going to quote what the PBO said, quote, "Current fiscal policy at the federal level is sustainable over the long term. In fact, according to the PBO, the federal government could even, quote, permanently increase spending by 1.5% of GDP. The only fiscal threat to Canada is Conservatives, who would cut health care, child care, national school fees."
The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
That PhD in WACKONOMICS has no clue. This incompetent finance minister, not knowing how to do math,
Colleagues, try to encourage as much freedom as possible in terms of the way people express themselves here. I'm going to ask honourable members. To, as much as possible, refrain from using language which is directed at a particular member and is considered insulting to those members. So I'm going to encourage all members, and I've spoken about this in a previous ruling. I'm going to ask the honourable member from Calgary Forest Lawn to start his question again, but to rephrase his question so that he doesn't use that kind of language.
that sounds like Liberal WACKONOMICS, and this incompetent finance minister not knowing how to do math ensured 50% of Canadians can't afford basic necessities like food. She'll give cushy contracts to rich Liberal insiders while telling the 2 million Canadians she sent into a food bank they can solve their Liberal-made misery by cancelling their Disney+. She knows higher deficits lead to higher taxes and lower standards of living. She just doesn't care. Why not call a carbon tax election now so Canadians can fire these economic arsonists?
I'm going to come back to members on this matter, but I'm going to encourage all members.
Nobody pays to see the referee.
I'm going to encourage all members to please keep their counsel when they're not recognized by the chair. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for your remonstrations, but I have to tell you, speaking for myself, puerile playground insults from the maple syrup mega don't bother me one bit.
As I mentioned, order. Order. This is precisely the reason why we should be very mindful of our language, because things will be said on all sides which is going to be disturbing to the order of the House. I'm going to come back to this matter, and I'm going to ask the Deputy Prime Minister to start her question again without using those words. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
As I said, Mr. Speaker, I can handle it. But what makes me really mad, what I can't handle, is seeing crocodile tears from these Conservatives. The only time they care, notice vulnerable Canadians, is for a partisan photo op. And we know they don't care because they are opposed to a national school food program that is feeding 400,000 Canadian kids. They're opposed to dental care that is helping 1 million. We care about Canadians. They just care about themselves.
The honourable member from Kildonan, St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, and time's up. The Toronto Police are on the front lines of gun violence in Canada. One of their officers was recently shot by a repeat violent offender. And yet, shockingly, yesterday, the Liberal Prime Minister took some deranged victory lap on social media for his attack on licensed, trained, and police-vetted sports shooters. And let's remember that after 9 years of Liberals, gun violence in Canada is up 116%. Their approach has categorically failed, Mr. Speaker. When will they finally get tough on the criminals responsible for gun violence?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, it's a shame to see once again Conservatives using the talking points of the gun lobby instead of standing up for victims of crime and standing up to get guns off our streets. Mr. Speaker, we also know that women are disproportionately affected by gun violence, and what do Conservatives do? They want more guns on our streets. They cut funds from CBSA to stop the import of illegal guns and then stand in this place acting as if they support victims of crime. Mr. Speaker, it's a shame. We have committed to get guns off our street while Conservatives work for the gun lobby.
The honourable member from Kildonan, St. Paul.
In the words of the Toronto Police Association to this Liberal Prime Minister, quote, "Criminals did not get your message. Our communities are experiencing a 45% increase in shootings, a 62% increase in gun-related homicides compared to the last year. What difference does your handgun ban make when 85% of guns seized by our members can be sourced to the United States? Your statement is out of touch and offensive to victims of crime and police officers everywhere. Whatever you think you've done to improve community safety has not worked. When will the Liberals call an election so we can finally bring an end to the crime and chaos they created in our streets?"
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Security.
Mr. Speaker, once again, let's talk about Conservative logic. They think putting more guns on our street is going to somehow keep our communities safer. We know that that doesn't work. Their cuts to CBSA to allow the import of illegal guns is something that we have had to clean up. Conservatives care only about the gun lobby and not about Canadians. Mr. Speaker, we have put in place
I'm actually going to. I've been having difficulty hearing the answer to this question, and I'm gonna because it. So I'm going to ask honourable members, please, to allow us to hear the answer to this question. There was a lot, from the moment that this member stood up, a lot of heckling. I'm going to ask the honourable member to start. The honourable member, honourable parliamentary secretary, can please start from the top.
Mr. Speaker, it's interesting that every time I stand in this place and call out Conservative hypocrisy around violence in our communities, they can't stand it. This is why they try to silence voices like mine who stand up for women in particular who are disproportionately affected by gun violence. Mr. Speaker, what Conservatives believe is more guns on our street will somehow help keep our communities safe. But we know what keeps communities safe is getting these guns off our streets, investing in CBSA to protect our borders, while Conservatives take their talking points from the gun lobby.
Hear, hear.
L'honorable député de Belle.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, for 9 years, this Liberal government has brought in policies that have caused a dramatic increase in crime, drug trafficking, arson, street gangs recruiting kids. Canadians and Quebecers are living in fear. But instead of helping Quebecers and doing something about this incompetence, the Bloc Québécois is continuing to support this bungling government